Alright, we'll look at the essay, but before that, if there are problems with research, that's a bigger problem. Because I think it was second to last week of last term, people got the list, and some people chose within a few days. So great, you know, if you chose then, and you got into the and I gave you the question. So, you know, some people got themselves organised and researched back then. So how many weeks is that? We've got the last week, then 2 weeks of term. Some people have got 4 weeks of research down already, which you should have. Okay, if you're stuck, please don't wait this long before telling me you're stuck. Because really, you know, that's 4 weeks you've lost. That's huge in terms of, if people have done a couple of hours or an hour a day of research on average, that's times 7, that's, you know, about almost 30 hours of research that you're behind on. And the date is the 23rd of November, which is basically a month, isn't it? You've now got 4 weeks. Given that the last 2 weeks before that date, you should have your first draft done. Because we do the swapping, don't we, over 2 weeks. Alright? Can anyone work out the arithmetic of this? How many weeks does it give you for research? 2. Right? You've got 2 weeks now to research this. That is really inadequate to do a good job. You know, this is time management, really. I said, you know, way back in first term about the first one. The best rule about essay writing, choose quickly. Choose and get into it. If you have difficulties, then go and see whoever's in charge, whether it's me, whether it's your tutor next year or whatever, you know. You've got to talk to people. Don't sit and just stay stuck, because you end up losing a month of time. It's a massive problem. So, okay, so you've lost 30 hours. So you're going to have to put that 30 hours into the next 2 weeks, plus what everyone else would have normally done, which is another hour or so of research a day. So there's 14 hours plus 30, 44 hours in 2 weeks. 44 divided by 14. What's that? About 3, isn't it? 3.5? Okay, you've got to put in 3.5 hours roughly of research now a day to be kind of on track with what would have sort of been the normal situation. That's a lot. That's a lot, isn't it? Where are you going to find that time? It's going to be tricky. You're going to have to commit lots of time to it, weekends and stuff. Okay, how do you progress with this? Start with Wikipedia. Talked about this last week. I'm just going back to research. Find someone, Inga Clendinen. There'll be a blurb about her. Blah, blah. Now, out of that, it says she's interested in that. She's written on that. She's written on that. She's written about, She's written about the Aztecs. She's written about the Mayans. She's written on the Holocaust. She's written about the philosophy of history. We know that, don't we, from this essay. She's probably got other things. Who knows? Okay, out of that, what am I interested in? I'm interested in her for a start because I like history. Alright, this person thought, right, that is what I'm going to look at. So philosophy of history, historical method, how is history used, how should it be taught, history and democracy, all those questions, yeah? So, I guess you could then you go to Google, search box, Inga Clendinen, philosophy of history, or, you know, there's a paragraph there, isn't there, or several, and there are certain key phrases in there, like, it says how she's interested in history and democracy. Okay, Inga Clendinen, history and democracy. Inga Clendinen, teaching history. Inga Clendinen, what else was she looking at? Her other main thing. Good history. Her notion of good history. You see how we're getting it? That's fairly simple. You just start, in some cases, these public intellectuals, when I was putting those profiles together, that was a few years ago, some of them didn't have Wikipedia entries. Some of the lesser known ones. Inga Clendinen might be one of those. But if you're picking one of the more, I'd say 3/4 of them have Wikipedia entries, and most people here have picked the easier people and the more prominent people. However, if you can't find Wikipedia, no doubt if you put somebody's name like that in, you get some kind of introductory thing. You start, even if, another trick for research I find useful, really obvious, you know. You're starting a new topic, you put the topic's name, it could be nuclear power, introduction. You'll get easy, broad stuff, you know. Put a person's name in, Martin Luther King, introduction. You generally get easier stuff. It'll give you that big picture about Martin Luther King's life, and then you can decide out of the 6 things he was, you know, main achievements, which is the one you really want to. I mean, he's not Australian, of course, just to give you an example. But that is a useful term often. So if you don't get that, if that doesn't seem to exist, try this technique. But obviously once you do get it, you've just got to read, and then you pick out the aspect, the issue I should say, that you're interested in, and then look at the treatment of it and pick out keywords and keep putting them into Google or into the ABC, remember? The 3 main research resources. Google, ABC, EBSCO database, the database that TAFE library has that we've practiced using in the last term. You know, put them in there. And you know, then you get another article, don't you? And there'll be keywords in there that then you put back into Google to get. Research is sort of a process like that, isn't it? It gets more and more refined, and you end up with lots of articles. So a lot of that process is kind of getting a keyword from this point and putting it back into your search engine, and well, I should do it here. Putting it back into a search engine, and it creates more results and more results and more results. So that's quite important, sort of recycling terms that you discover, or even names. Somebody says something about Clendinen, and you can see, oh, that's a pretty important comment. So you put their name in Inga Clendinen. Maybe they are opposed to her ideas, and then you'll get 600 or 600 articles about that person and Inga Clendinen and the argument they had, you know, and that might be important, and it might become a paragraph in your piece. That's for you to decide as a researcher. But this idea of kind of recycling some keywords that you find as you read back in to get more and more specific. Just the idea of this branching, I just want to pick up on a point Mohammed, you mentioned. It's a good point. If you look at the essay question, it does say 1 issue. Now, in this essay, how many elements does he explore? Is it 4? 3. I get 3. We'll find out where those 3 are in a minute. But okay, it's 3. So Mohammed had a good question. It says 1 issue here. So how come he's got 3? Well, what happens is that's the issue, but that issue has 3 aspects, doesn't it? Aspect. So aspect 1, aspect 2, aspect 3. So just because you're looking at 1 issue doesn't mean that you have to just have one main idea through the whole thing. You have, in this case, it's 3. Somebody else, you know, depending, you might have 5 or 6 or 7. So just to clarify that difference between an issue and the aspects of it. Okay, shall we spend a little bit of time, just the first page or 2 now, looking at, yeah.
When we Google and research, like for example, John Crow, when I research about him,
Yeah.
I found so many articles. Some people wrote about him, and
Yes.
they explained their point of view. So
Yes.
can we still use that ideas?
Absolutely. If we look at this writer, we've got a number of pieces by the intellectual themselves. think we've looked at this already. We've got 4 pieces, haven't we? 4 articles. I think they're all articles. Oh, there's a book there actually. The second one, 1999. Yeah. So, but he's got 10 or so references. So only, you know, about a third of your information sources are the person themselves. You're getting other people, like you said, writing about that person. And they may explain something very clearly, or be critical, maybe, you know, whatever. And you want to use that, sure, you use quite a lot of that. In fact, the majority of your references are not necessarily going to come from the person themselves. Sure, you'll get good summaries, explanations, criticisms, approvals, whatever, from others. So you're going to be reading material that people wrote, but material about that person by other people. Sure.
So what about, because like one of the books he wrote, it's not just himself, he got another 3 people with that book, so still...
it's a team.
Yeah,
Yeah, still
so
you regard that as his...
As his work?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so no doubt they're agreeing in the book and putting an argument commonly,
Okay.
so you can regard that as his argument.
I don't have to mention other 3 people, I just mention only about him, or...
You'd say, look, you could do it either way. You'd have to obviously at the beginning mention that it's Fro, Howard and Donaldson, you know, and then you could write they believe that, or you could say in this work Fro believes. It doesn't really matter, but as long as you've told the reader that it is actually part of a team, that's okay. Okay, now let's have a look at the very beginning, the first paragraph. For the sake of time, I'll just throw out what I think, and if you've got questions or comments, go for it. It's really the first paragraph that is the introduction. It doesn't go further. But there's a bit of a problem. So it goes down to where it says Clendenin has her own idea of history. That's the beginning of the body. But if we look at this introduction, there are problems with it, I think. Fine beginning. The opening's fine. And there's pretty quick mention of her other work. And that's what you should do as well. Fairly quickly. This is very quick. You could be a little, you know, a couple more sentences if you like, on the other areas that they've covered. That's quite important to say what the key other areas are. It helps put that person in context. In other words, don't say nothing about that. It is important to put that in context. Okay, then, as a serious historian, Clendenin, and we can put a 1 here. This is the first element, isn't it? That's explored in the essay. Emphasises the significance of good history. And the rest of it is a little bit of explanation. Keeps telling truth as our iron rule to research the past and rejects any distorted history or single narrative history. That's all sort of one main element. She, too, objects to teaching national values and puts forward what kind of history should be taught at school. That's the second main element. 3, the explanation of the relationship between history and fiction. In a history question, who owns the past triggered another round of the history war. So those are the 3 elements that become sections in the essay. But if you take that last one, it's sort of just a statement of fact. It's like this exploration triggered another round of the history wars. It doesn't sort of say this essay is going to explore these things, or you don't necessarily have to use those words, but you've got to kind of structure it so the reader is clear. Okay, these 3 things I will expect to be developed in the essay, and it doesn't really do that. And then there's the other problem that the rest of the introduction is about, well, she got this award, Officer of the Order of Australia, and there was this citation, you know, a little bit of like speech giving that said these nice things about her. No, that's okay to say that stuff. By the way, I think I have mentioned, don't list, you know, some of these people have won an enormous number of prizes. Don't bother to list them all. I guess if there's a Nobel Prize in there, you can mention that, you know. But seriously, a lot of these people have got, 20-something more awards. Just, it's a waste of time going through all those. Don't do it in your PowerPoint either. It's so no one's going to remember it. I remember at my daughter's graduation, it was earlier this year. This very interesting speaker spoke. He was ex-head of the National Health Medical Research Council, which is really high up, and he had so many achievements. The person introducing took about 10 minutes, literally, to go through this person's life and all the achievements, and sort of like, yeah, all right. Sort of, everyone was asleep by the time he spoke. Okay, so there's that bit there. But we know, if you remember, the classical essay, that bit there should be your thesis, shouldn't it? The end bit, and then it stops. So what I would do is I would take he's got it kind of the other way around. The thesis is sort of in the middle here. And then we've got this quotation. So there aren't many indications to the reader that this is what I'm going to talk about, and be really explicit about it. I think, the essay is pretty good, but this is one of the biggest weaknesses of the piece. Which I think is useful, because this is why I threw it at you, because you can see how something doesn't work. It's going to help you make something that works. Right? So, what I would do is this. I'll read how at least the order it should go like this. Ingrid Clendenin is one of Australia's most distinguished historians. Not only has her work on Aztec and Mayan cultures and the Holocaust been praised around the world, but also her idea of history has had considerable impact on historical scholarship. Now you jump down to, as a public intellectual, Clendenin was appointed an officer of the Order of Australia. Then put your quotation in, right? We're still just introducing the person, aren't we? And we're saying, well, she achieved this Order of Australia. That's pretty cool. All right. Then, as a serious historian, Clendenin emphasises da-da-da, she objects to da-da-da, and I think you need to say, to turn that last one into something more like the third element in a thesis, she also explores, turn it into a verb. And then you're mentioning, okay, she's concerned, we're getting a clearer idea now. It's saying Clendenin emphasises this, she objects to this, and she explores this. And now we're kind of getting a clearer statement about what her concerns are, and we can expect to see these three things. Can you see how that would make it clearer?
You mean this is a statement? She has the person has to say that this is a statement, or what has to be
well,
a statement?
You don't have to say. Look, if you really, really want to be explicit, you can do this. That's the clearest way of, a thesis statement is like a signpost, isn't it, saying Sydney this way. It's like a journey, and we're going this way, we're not going that way or that way. We're going to go this way, and we're going to explore these three things. Now, if you want to really indicate clearly it's a signpost, then that is a classic thing at the beginning of a thesis statement.
Can you make that this is a statement of it?
All right, yeah. Let's go back to, imagine we've rearranged it in that order. We've got the introduction, then we've got that prize giving and the quotation. Then we say, this essay will explore how, as a serious historian, Clendenin emphasises, yes? And we finish the sentence. It will also examine how she objects to teaching national values. Can you see how it will also explore, meaning the essay? So we're now making this, your writing of the essay, kind of in the front of the reader's mind, aren't we? And then the last one you might say, it will also I need another verb here. It will also examine how she explores the relationship between history and fiction. That would be your most explicit way of making it clear to the reader. You're basically saying, I am going to explore this, examine this, and analyse this, whatever, you know, your 3 verbs. Just have 3 different ones for your 3 different elements. Yeah.
You still have the thesis statement, but not as explicit as you said it.
The thesis statement is sort of here. You don't have to do this. This is, yeah, I'm giving you the model of the most explicit way of doing it. All right? You don't have to. You could drop that off and just do it like what he's done, but he's a bit too implicit. He needs to be a bit clearer in the sense that, you know, how I changed it. Clendinen does this, she objects to this, and that number 3 should be she explores. You need to change it to that. So that then we can see, all right, she does this, she does this, she does this. We would expect implicitly that the rest of the essay would be, you know, about those 3 things. Yeah? So look, simple message out of all of that. If you want to be simple and clear, this essay will explore how X, your public intellectual, does whatever. Analyses, argues, treats, examines, and then the issue. Verb, and then issue. Alright, now just one thing about this though. Here's the downside of doing this. You know, can you imagine how many essays I've read in my life now that say, this essay will, this essay will, this essay will, this essay will. Right? And I know, you know, it's a joke down in the staff room. Oh my God, this essay will. Ah! You know, because it's the 33,743rd essay we've read that says this essay will. Yeah? It's so usual that, you know, it drives us nuts. So, look, there are other ways of doing it.
Yeah, you have mentioned the website.
The academic phrase bank, exactly. That's a really good, thank you for the suggestion. So you get in there and see how, you know, what phrases, when it says introducing a work, introducing a topic. Great idea, thank you for that.
But
Yeah,
they
the academic
do
phrase
it,
bank.
They as well. They do.
I'll get in there and I'll send an email to the website and make sure they remove it by tomorrow.
I can check that. Yeah, they do have a one column
Yeah.
like that.
Ultimately, you know, essays are kind of practice for the real thing, aren't they? What is the real thing? Writing for a journal, actually getting published. Go and look at publications. You're probably actually, in the process of doing your research, you're probably reading some articles. Have a look how, I mean, an article, you know, is basically an essay. Just, it's good, it's really, the best practice is to go out into the real world and look at how people are using English and, you know, rather than just classroom English, that's the best practice. Go out and look beyond what I'm telling you in the classroom here. Have a look at how real article writers, how do they do their thesis statement? How do they introduce and tell the reader, this is what I'm going to examine? And, you know, have a good look and collect a few collocations. And as Sadia said, you know, if somebody's already kind of done that work in the academic phrase bank, you can go there. That's a shortcut. But there's no substitute really. Best practice would be go out to the real world and find articles and look and keep looking and keep noticing. And in 4 years' time, keep noticing, you know, and keep getting better and more refined and more sophisticated at using certain collocations and structures to do this job. That is your absolute best practice. Reading with this kind of meta-awareness, isn't it? And collecting continuously. So you'll very rarely, I think, see this sort of thing, this article will. You do see it a bit. I mean, it's just a simple replacement of that, but it's sort of a bit B grade. And editors of journals might say, don't do it, and they change it. And you'll find other things in there. Okay, so look, that I think is a problem there. But we've kind of untangled it, straightened it out. And I hope you've learned something from that untangling process. How are we going for time? Yeah, then we get into the body. Clear thesis, topic sentence. She has her own idea of history, which is essential for us to fully understand it. There's not always a clear boundary where topic sentences end, because she believes in the practical usefulness of good history, both morally and politically. It almost flows over into that second sentence, doesn't it? The main idea. Then there's talk about, explanation of what this idea of good history. I think that second sentence is definitely part of that topic sentence, if you like. There's a topic 2 sentences here, and that's okay to do. We shouldn't really restrict that rule to the first sentence. It's just the point is, at the very beginning of your paragraph, whether it takes 1 sentence or 2 sentences or sometimes even 3, communicate the main idea, and then the rest is explanation. And look, that phrase, good history, is used through the rest of the paragraph, isn't it? So we always need to include that second sentence as part of the topic sentence idea. Yeah, so it's about good history. It's really vital to shape a nation. Further down, the opposite of that, the idea of manipulating or neglecting or distorting the past, will ruin the future of a nation. So treatment of the past of a nation is really important for its future. That's the kind of main idea here that is being explained to the reader. Then there's a little tiny, it's not really a conclusion, it's just introducing the next several paragraphs, isn't it? This writer is going to try to give the example of this good history practice by looking at, how it might work with Aboriginal communities. So there's this little, it's almost like just a little signpost paragraph to indicate the next few paragraphs. The next 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs are going to deal with Aboriginal focus. So the next paragraph on top of page 2 just mentions the context. It's the Boyer lectures, and it says, what she argues.
On Aboriginal issues.
Yeah, she researched on Aboriginal issues, so we're focused on that. And one thing he does throughout the essay is quite nice. Clendenin argues, Clendenin believes, Clendenin objects to. So these useful verbs, which make it very explicit what she thinks, that's something you need to do with your public intellectual. Have a good list of these, what we call reporting verbs: argues, claims, believes, maintains, holds, objects to, all that sort of stuff. So here we see in the third line, Clendenin argues that despite the settlers having built a democratic nation, a little bit of extra, Aborigines are still excluded from that equality. That's the key idea in that paragraph. Next paragraph, there's no real mention of history in there, so you could think, well, how's that connected with their idea of history? All right, he doesn't leave it too long, because the next paragraph, Clendenin attributes this fact to the ignorance or denial of the past in the topic sentence there. Yeah. So even though there's a paragraph before it which hasn't actually got into the historical stuff straight away, she's had to describe the problem in the present, and then the next paragraph says this is a problem because of how history is being treated. So he's still very much on topic. And there's a description, that next paragraph is a description about how there's been that denial of the past. A key point in the middle. From her point of view, again, good, clear, explicit signalling. It's a bit like Clendenin believes, but from his point of view, this is why I say go through and collect collocations and look for good verbs. That's something you can do with this piece. because all that stuff is transferable into your essay, isn't it, pretty much? So from her point of view, from Philip Adams's point of view, blah, blah, blah. From Tim Flannery's point of view, and then you put the idea. The ignorance of history should be no the. Gives rise to a government more likely to intervene in the affairs of Aboriginal communities. Yeah, so that's probably the key idea there.